Hello, everyone. Thanks for checking out this special episode of Really Dicey. This is Manny, and I'm here with.
Hi, my name is David Trotti, and I'm the author of Japan, Empire of Shadows.
I've been waiting for this book for a long time. I've been a fan of Japanese horror. So, yes, Japan, Empire of Shadows, hunting the mythos in Imperial era Japan. So, first things first, how did this book come about?
Well, during COVID, I wound up with a lot of downtime, as most of us did. And I was going through old Japanese magazines and old Japanese books. And one of the things I'd gone and done during the time was I had translated the old Record of Lodoss War magazine issues that had come out, where they'd serialized the what would later become the anime Record of Lodoss War. And as I was going through all of this, it really struck me that, one of my favorite games, Call of Cthulhu, did not have a 1920s setting for Japan. I was thinking, Japan, Cthulhu, what could go wrong? But it's also like you, it was something I really wanted. They did a great job with Children of Fear, covering, Central Asia and China, and of course Masks of Nyarlathotep, covering all the way from New York to Shanghai. So, but there was nothing really covering the Pacific or Japan, and yet at the time, Japan was this amazing, growing country that just out of nowhere, you consider where it had come from in the 1850s, since it had been opened as a feudal backwater little island country, to by the 1920s becoming one of the top three industrialized powers on the planet. And it struck me that this is such a great setting. And like you said, with the Japanese horror and the Grudge, and going back to the Japanese have an actual real love for H.P. Lovecraft. And in fact, Call of Cthulhu is, if not the best selling role-playing game in Japan, it's certainly one of the top. And it just struck me that why doesn't this exist? And during the time of COVID, it was like, well, if it's ever gonna happen, if it's ever gonna exist, I think I'm gonna have to be the one that just knuckles down and does it. And then it just kind of grew from there. Originally, it was just going to be a small, maybe 100 pages, 120 pages of, hey, here's some cool stuff in Tokyo, and here's some cool, background things, and here's a scenario. And as I kept going, it just kept evolving into the 400-page beast that it's become.
Hmm. And you can find it right now at Drive to RPG, both as a PDF and a print version if you wish.
Yes, and then
Uh,
soon, hopefully by the time this comes out, not only the soft cover is out now, but this bad boy should be coming soon, the hardcover. I had to send it back to the printer because when I was creating the cover, I liked this distance here with this little black trim, but up here it was just a little too close. So it's been about a month delay while I've been waiting for Lightning Source to resend me the proof. But I really want it to be the best product that it can be, so that when somebody puts reads it first and has a great time with it and goes with their players, they can put this on the shelf and you can just look at it and say, damn, that is a fine mighty beast.
is there anything doing your research and putting this together that really caught your attention?
Just how do I put this? It's such a collision at that time between spiritualism, tradition, and the adoption of Western culture and technology. And a lot of people want to look at that time period, and especially in Japan, and say, oh, well, they were just mimicking Western technology or mimicking Western culture. And really, that's not the case. From my research and everything that I looked into it, the Japanese made a really social wide, nationwide decision of how they were going to approach the future. And they took it into their own hands to do this. And that was something that struck me that, a lot of people may not think about when you think of Japan now. You think of, the technological marvel, the amazing industrial capacity, Tokyo with, ungodly millions of people living in the giant high-rise towers. But really the progress that in 40 years they took from being basically an agrarian society to the most rapid industrialization of any country that's ever happened. And it's that collision between a traditionalist past that's rooted in Shinto animism, the national religion at the time of Japan, and which still to this day is a living religion, where this everything is alive, trees, the water, anything can have what the Japanese call a kami, a spirit in it. You know, it can be a natural force, it can be an ancestor, it can be a full god, as opposed to this new thing that had come in, which was science and technology, where the steam engine was an amazing thing, electricity was an amazing thing. And you have this collision between science and mysticism, which really is what's at the heart of Call of Cthulhu, too, where it is mankind is reaching into places they may not fully understand and drawing out these forces that may be more than they can handle. And so it just really struck me as that's one of the core things that I have within it is that you are always pushing the edge of both sides of mysticism and technology when you're risking so much and unleashing forces you may not understand.
In this book, what keeper tools or investigator options do you have available?
Well, one of the things that I really loved was do you remember the old Secrets of series from Call of Cthulhu, where it would be like Secrets of Tibet or Secrets of Cairo? One of my favorites was Secrets of Los Angeles. And one of the things I loved in that was it gave you great maps. It gave you great locations that were very well mapped out on the maps. So you could turn to the map and you say, oh, okay, here's Hollywood, and here's some interesting things. And then each one had a number, and you could turn to it. And at each of those locations, which were easy to find, there were story hooks. There were NPCs, there were maps for the like a speakeasy, and maybe you'd run into a mob boss, and then you'd find out, you know, at the next location, which is the mob boss's mansion, there's, you know, some cult or mythos thing going on. And then it would deepen. So every so often, this would recur throughout. So the story hooks would kind of tie into each other occasionally or encourage you to go to the next location hook, which was great as a sandbox setting because, okay, let's say you're trying to do one particular storyline, but your players suddenly veer you on a different course that you aren't quite prepared for. You could quickly open this book up and maybe it's, you know, you grab this one here and you put the speakeasy over here and you could incorporate that into your campaign. So for a keeper, one of the fun tools that I've tried to incorporate into it is the ability to have a real sandbox feeling experience for the players, because you have in this over 350 locations. There's all sorts of different, there's orphanages that are haunted by creatures. There's, you know, the girls' school that's got a fox spirit in it. There's, you know, the mystery that's going on with this tainted coal that's come back into the country that's, you know, got this mythos creature embedded in it that burning it releases. And there are different story hooks that I've placed throughout it that the keeper can either choose to incorporate on the fly, turn into a broader work that they can run with, or just ignore but have a setting that, okay, here's a coffee shop or a cafe that the people can go into. Here's some interesting NPCs they can interact with. Here's some rumors they can pick up, and then just transplant that as they need to different places or use it where it's set. Other things that I've tried to do is, you know, I don't want to tinker with the mechanics of the rules, because then nobody should, you know, when you're putting out a source book like that, because you want to keep it as simple as you can. But one of the fun things I wanted to do was, you've got all these great fighting styles, like, you know, you've got karate and aikido and judo and even sumo that have really cool storytelling potential moves in them, as an example. So without doing anything to the mechanics of the brawl skill, how do you know, add something cool into the storyline? So I took just little bits for each different fighting style, and I created a specialty for, let's say you want your character to specialize in judo, which is you know, a non-attack really. It's more defense and using your enemy's energy against them to do something. So I think it's really cool to give a player an option of, instead of just doing the typical punch and roll some dice and okay, here's what happens, give them like a couple of special moves within judo that are simple, easy to use, but add a storytelling dynamic. I even threw one in for sumo, just in case somebody wanted to play with the little sumo idea, where it's you're using the sheer energy or size against an opponent, or they're, when they come ramming against you, you can bounce them back and do things. So for players, I really wanted to give the ability to deepen their role playing and character experience through things like the I don't want to say new rules, but more just a little additional bump to give it a little color and flavor when you play these. One of the other things I wanted to do is, as you look through it, you'll see there's a new skill in there, unique to Japan Empire of Shadows, which is called Japanese etiquette. And so, you and I looking in at Japan think, wow, I just can't follow what's, when do you bow? How do you bow? You're not expected in the game to understand the actual real rules. But Japanese etiquette is a social skill like credit rating or psychology, where if you put some points into it, or if you're playing a Japanese character, you intuitively know certain things like when is the proper time to bow, what are the right honorifics to use. And if you win your skill check or you successfully make your skill check, then it impresses people, much like a credit rating might, or using psychology on somebody might. It just shows that you know the proper etiquette in the right situation that might impress somebody, a professor or someone, to give you some information, or to actually invite you into their house and talk to you when they might otherwise shut the door. So I thought that was an interesting way to kind of, for say you're playing a foreign investigator that's coming into Japan. What's great is you feel like an alien outsider when you walk into this strange situation. And so, which plays right into Call of Cthulhu, you can't go running right to the police. You can't go running right to the locals, because there's a language barrier, there's a culture barrier. But this is one way you as a character can role play and mechanically put into the rules a way that you can overcome that through role playing. So I thought that was a fun thing to add in.
Hmm. Can you tell us about the art direction for the book?
One of the things that I had a great time doing this is doing the research. And a lot of that came down to, we think of when we think of the 1920s and 1930s, we're so used to black and white films, where it's like we think of the noir look and the things like that. But for Japan, color, there is so much color to everything, especially at the time. Everything is bright and beautiful in color. Yet, when I'm going through all and when anybody does research, you'll find most of the pictures are black and white. It's the period in time. But there's a lot of hand-colored postcards and colored photography that's been hand tinted, and they put out books at the time that were very popular. And the art of the time, there's the new Shin Hanga style, which looks very much like what we think of manga being today, where it's the very highly detailed line drawings that are then colored in with 4-color print. I really wanted to bring that vibrancy and color to life, because it adds such a unique character to the time and the setting, and it's a way we don't look at the past a lot of times. So when I approached it, the first thing I did was I looked at all of the ways that the new 7th edition books have been going towards color, or are in color, with the cream colored papers or the old paper backgrounds. So even starting from the background, I really wanted to put in a background color to each page that had that old timey feel. So it's got this cream colored old paper look to it. Then the individual the font styles as we go are directly taken from the Call of Cthulhu. The Chaosium has put out a Adobe InDesign template, so all of the fonts are there. So it's Georgia is the main font for the text. The headlines are all the same ones that Call of Cthulhu uses, Chaosium uses. And then for the pictures, I really wanted every single location to be grounded in a picture that you could look at and say, wow, I get what this place was. So if I have a hospital setting, I have a real picture of that hospital. I occasionally, if I could find it, I include a map of it that is the real map of the real hospital. Or if you go to the university, that's a real period specific map of Tokyo's Imperial University at the time. So I felt really I wanted to, as soon as a keeper opens up the book and looks at a location or sees an NPC, that's the real person. I'd say there's over 70 NPCs. I'd say of them, 98%, those are their real pictures. That's the real person from the period in that picture. Then I colorized them in Photoshop. A lot of things I was able to find postcards that were hand tinted. So a lot of the postcards and pictures drawn from that are actual, period correct colored pictures. I did a lot of research on what were the color schemes for uniforms, what were the color schemes for kimono patterns, what were the buildings painted like. It's right now you're looking at a black and white picture, but still to this day, some of those buildings still exist, and you can go and see online what the colors of the building currently are and intuit whether that's the correct color. So I tried with the color schemes to make sure I was as period accurate as correct. When you look at the planes, there's a whole section on automobiles and planes. I went and did research looking at the different extant models that still exist or pictures from the time that were painted. So the color schemes on the aircraft are correct. The cars, those are the actual colors that the cars would have been painted at that time. So I really wanted to maintain authenticity through the art direction throughout to kind of mirror the authenticity of the factual basis of locations, NPCs, and the time. Of course, blended in with the mythos setting.
Could you guys give us a quick overview of the sections of the major sections of the book, or the adventures and the hooks and the options and so forth?
Well, there's
Um,
three kind of narrative threads that run through it, and then there's a whole bunch of story hooks
mm,
that follow along. So the first chapter, I've divided it up into 8 chapters and then about six appendices. So I won't get overly detailed. I won't bore everybody with everything. But the first chapter I call Chapter One, Empire of the Sun. And what it really is an introduction to Japan at the time for people who may not know that much about it. And even people who do, it's a way of kind of deepening their knowledge a little bit. But I tried to keep it as brief and entertaining as I could in going, because you don't want to turn it into a doctoral thesis. And also, I tried to keep things in terms of how do they impact gameplay, what's entertaining about it, what's interesting about it. So I cover things like, if you're bringing a foreign investigator to Japan, here's what to expect. Here's skills you might want to incorporate. If you're thinking of creating a Japanese character or a Korean character to play in this setting, here are some things to think about and ways that you can incorporate them. Do you make them, part of the nobility? What are the risks and interesting things that entails? If they're a normal citizen, what types of backgrounds can exist? To a large part, almost everything is analogous to the 7th edition character creation anyway, but there's certain specific things that occasionally I will call out for entertainers or dilettantes, things that might help the role-playing experience as they create their characters, as players create their characters. Talking about transportation, trains were common at the time, cars very uncommon. There were, mostly had to be imported from outside. A lot of Fords were there. Ford Model Ts at the time were I think it was the main car in Japan. But what kind of cars could you get access to? How do you get fuel? It's not like here in the 1920s we can think, okay, you're driving through Arkansas and you're going between different towns and maybe there's a little rural gas station. How does that work when you're in Japan and maybe the roads haven't been paved and they're still designed for carts from the 1830s. So it's like, how do you make that fun when you're playing it? Cafe life. I talk a little bit about the cafes at the time. Cafes there were kind of borrowed from Parisian society, but then adapted in a very Japanese way. They had female hostesses there, and they served alcohol, and they were a little more risque, and they ranged from very high-end places to, the honky tonk style, Japanese honky tonk style version of it, where different classes would come together. And so it's a great thing for characters to be able to base out of. So I spent a little time talking about cafes because they're good places to pick up rumors, to meet other NPC or to meet NPCs, for the characters to regroup. Talk a little bit about libraries and research, because so much of Call of Cthulhu comes down to finding out those cool clues. And so how did library research work? What types of libraries were available throughout the book? There are many libraries to go to and museums. What do you expect when you go in? How does that work? Technology. So talking about, and how that impacts gameplay. So if you're, trying to do an investigation there, what types of things are available to you? Does radio exist? When did it start existing? Train, how fast are the trains, and how soon can you get places? Air travel. When did air travel start? And what's available if you want to get a plane really fast? Boats. We talk about all sorts of different things. So chapter 1 really is about just an overview, so that keepers and players can say, wow, I understand a little bit more about this culture. You may not understand everything. There's a later chapter where that gets deeper into the thoughts and things, but it's a quick overview, like 40 pages or so, just to give you a sense of it. Then chapter 2, the narrative threads. Now, the narrative threads, that's something that I really wanted to play with in this. And, I've heard good feedback on it. People seem to enjoy it. I've also heard from some of my Japanese friends that they're really looking forward to a more condensed version of it that comes out on its own, but I'll explain that in a moment. So what I've seen in the past on almost all Chaosium products and Miskatonic repository products that have kind of a source book feel to it is, you'll get the source book, and then at the end you'll get like 3 scenarios. And so when you read your source book and you've got your maps and all that, and then you go to the end and you've got your scenarios. I wanted to try embedding the scenarios through the course of the text, so that as you're reading the book, it's almost like you're uncovering the different mysteries as you're following along, but it also puts the game master tools for the narrative thread for the individual scenario at the locations they take place. So, for example, without giving too much away, one of the scenarios is called Upon a Stone Altar, and it takes the characters from Tokyo all the way down to mysterious, in Japanese, the name of the island is Ponape, but of course Pohnpei, where the great non-Medal ruins are. And so rather than in the back of the book just having the scenario and then you're having to constantly flip back through 400 pages of book, when you're in Tokyo and you're at the Imperial Hotel, any of the little beats for that story beat are at the Imperial Hotel. So it's color coded. Let me see if I can find it here as we flip through. All right. So I'll show it, and then maybe you'll be able to call up an image. So at the Imperial Hotel here, I'll hold this up. I've got about 6 pages on the Imperial Hotel, including a very nice map of the hotel itself. But at the end of it, I've got these colored boxes here, blue, red, and green. So blue is Upon a Stone Altar. So anytime you see a blue box like that, that's for that narrative thread. Red is for one of the other storylines. Green is for the one that goes up into Hokkaido. So for the Keeper, the story actually progresses pretty much in line with the book. So you start out in Tokyo, you start at the Imperial Hotel, you have your setup, and then at the end of each of the descriptions, it tells where you can go from there, so that you know where you, and also I should mention there's a thread map for each of the scenarios. So at the beginning of it, in traditional sense of the scenarios, you have all of the information, keeper information that you would need to help tell the story. And then I've created a thread map that tells you on what page you can find all of the different beats for the story and then the map locations for them. So you can follow the story along using your thread map here, or you can just enjoy the story on your first read through the book as you go and discover how the story progresses. So the reason I did this was as a keeper, I was constantly having to flip to the end of a book, read in the scenario, and then shuffle through pages to find the NPCs that are associated with that location, or the descriptions of that location. Here, it's all on the page when you go to that location at your fingertips, and the map gives you the page numbers in case you need to quickly reference where it is within the storyline. So, I've heard a lot of good feedback on it. People really like having that reference material here. They also like, as they read it through for the first time, you are discovering it and unraveling it like a story as well as you go to each of the different locations. So, but for the downside for people who are not native English speakers, sometimes it's hard to know how to navigate back and forth. So my plan is, as soon as things settle and I can get to it, I want to give a version of it that is in the traditional scenario format that's just the scenario, so that as a traditional scenario you can play it as a traditional scenario, but here at least the information is on the page.
So, just so I understand correctly,
Yeah.
three major storylines,
Yeah.
but each chapter that describes location has information for all those three different mysteries for you to. So it's almost like this is a very fluid book in the sense of the adventure. So that, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So that if you, let's say, I'm gonna Okinawa, in
Mm-hmm.
chapter 5, Cities of the Empire. Um,
Yes.
so I can choose if I wanted to not to use Okinawa at all. I could just skip ahead and use it because players tend to do things their own way sometimes. So if they jump ahead to a different location that you weren't planning, the book has planned it though. So there's information
Correct.
there for you to use. That's really fascinating. If I may ask, where did the idea for this come from? I don't think I've seen a source book this.
It just evolved as because I was writing the scenarios separately. And then as I was going through the book and I was writing all the different locations, it just hit me, why don't I just put the events that happen in the story at the location they happen? So that it just evolved naturally. It really didn't come out of, oh, I've seen this done elsewhere. And it may have trickled in from somewhere, and it probably has been done before, but I couldn't think of anywhere, and especially in the Chaosium product line, I couldn't find an example of it. But I thought, you know what? It just feels intuitive. So I decided to incorporate it and try it. And it seems to work fairly well. So, talking about like the Okinawa portion of it. If your characters say completely skip Okinawa, let's say that they decide to rush headlong from Tokyo right down to non-Madal ruins at Ponape, the different sections have suggestions for you. Okay, if they didn't get this important clue here, here's a way to incorporate it here that they can find it. So it doesn't feel like you're railroading them at any point in time, but they can find the information. So when they get to the end, the important clue that they needed to get, they didn't miss it by bypassing something. So, I try to always present an option for the keeper of, okay, if your characters missed getting this really cool stone tablet that has all the translations to do this, it's in this museum over here. They can still find it there.
Mm,
So, yes, I really wanted to. That's the other thing. I really wanted to give a sandbox environment because one of the things, as a creator, you're always reading reviews of other people's products and how did they handle this? Or you're reading the product itself and saying, wow, that feels kind of railroady. And I don't want keepers or players to feel, oh, this is a railroad experience where there's a boss battle at the end. It should feel open because, like you said, players will do the damnedest things. There's
mm.
no predicting. So I really wanted to be able to give them that open experience that you could visit any of these locations and still feel that you are finding clues towards your key adventure that you're trying to get to.
Mm. Are there any um, uh, new monsters per se? Were you able to incorporate, like, I guess it must be tricky trying to balance like Cthulhu horror, and then there's Japanese folklore and horror.
Mhm.
Were you able to how were you able to interweave all that together?
It actually came out pretty intuitively. There are times when you want to introduce a Japanese uh, creature, and one of the things that I've done throughout it is, and there's these purple boxes that are called the kwaidan, and kwaidan comes from mysterious stories. It means a mysterious tale or mysterious story. And there was a wonderful Greek Irish author who went over to Japan and became a Japanese citizen, Lafcadio Hearn. And back in the 1890s, early 1900s, he wrote this book called The Kwaidan because he was like the Brothers Grimm to a certain degree for Japanese folklore. Japanese folklore was largely an oral tradition. It had been recorded in various places, but never really codified or put down. And he went and did a Brothers Grimm style book on the subject, telling different mysterious stories. So I decided that there are so many great locations here where that are connected to real Japanese myths and legends. Like, for example, you mentioned the ring when we started talking. Well, that's based on a Japanese legend of a servant girl who broke a dish in a castle, and the lord of the castle was so angry he had her cast into the well, and her spirit began emerging from the well with the dripping water and the hair and the, so the ring is very much based and rooted in Japanese legend and lore. Well, this castle actually exists, and it's a place you can go to in the book and face this spirit. There's a legend called the Legend of Oiwa, which is a husband kills his wife so that he can marry the beautiful daughter of the rich next door doctor, and the ghost of the wife comes back, very much the grudge, and haunts his dreams and drives him to madness and takes her revenge on everyone. It's the actual family home of that family exists, or it did exist. It's now a shrine in the northern part of Tokyo, the Otsuya Ward. But you can go to that shrine and visit it to this day. It exists. So it's a location you can visit in the book. There's just so many fascinating stories. So I wanted to, whenever you find a purple box in here, the purple box is a kwaidan. It's a real story from Japanese myth and legend, fox spirits, the raccoon dogs, the different transforming creatures, ogres and different monsters. And then I've created the monster characters that are monsters that you can encounter, and I've tried to give them a little bit of a mythos spin. I didn't want to go too hard on those characters as mythos, although it all kind of links together. But then there, you can definitely run into mythos creatures through the course of it. I won't tell people where exactly, but Katana Thoa is definitely waiting out there somewhere to run into. So there's, and then also the Migo play a part, of course, technology and brain cases and putting people's brains down in Osaka. There's a section where the Japanese fascination with robots has been forever, it seems. In the 1920s, this guy built a giant robot called Gakko Tensoku, that's like this 15-foot tall robot that could have expressions and was driven by pistons and steam and levers, and could actually write out different uh, kanji for different thoughts that it would just, different gears and levers would trigger. And the Migo, of course, become very interested in this robot character. So yes, there's an incorporation of many different Lovecraftian mythos, classic mythos creatures throughout it. But I really wanted to, capture like fox spirits, which it's ubiquitous throughout Japanese, mythology and legends of these fox spirits that can transform into beautiful women, but then uh, pull horrible twisted pranks on people too, and ogres and yokai and oni and the little reptilian kappa who dwell in the rivers and drag people down to their deaths.
Hmm.
So, it's you pick and choose as you go, as you find a location that's really suitable for a particular creature. You say, wouldn't that be cool to have here? And then I would try to develop, if I put a really cool central creature to defeat in one of the story hooks, I would usually, in that same area right around it, lay in a couple of the other locations supplemental beats to that storyline for clue finding, to suggest to the keeper, okay, if you're going to try to take down this cult that is kidnapping prostitutes and sacrificing them in order to open a gate to the dreamlands to be able to do these terrible things, not only do you have the cult's headquarters where you're going to be able to confront them, but you've got the brothels where women are being kidnapped from, and the red herring guy who might be the bad guy, but then you find out it goes deeper than that. And you can pick up other clues over at somebody's home where the parents are worried about their missing child, that all kind of tie back into each other. But I try to lay the narrative threads in an order so that as you are reading through the book, you make those discoveries for yourself in the form of a story, which is the way hopefully your players will encounter them as you as a keeper are presenting the mystery to them. But knowing that, the players will do what the players will do, and you may have to shuffle some order around so you can still satisfactorily bring it to a head at the end of the story.
Hmm.
That's the long-winded way of saying, yes, I tried to incorporate traditional mythos creatures with the Japanese pantheon that exists.
Hmm. If I may ask, if if um if your book is this book is studied, let's say, 50 years from now, what themes or what do you hope that anyone looking at this book uh, uh, will find? What do you hope to convey in your work, in your art?
Well, one of the things that it really hadn't crystallized in my mind until one of the readers of the book had reached out to me and was asking similar questions about a theme that they'd noticed in it. And I had been aware that I was putting this theme in as I was going, but it really hadn't crystallized how much I had incorporated it until this reader had pointed it out to me. And what it is there is an undercurrent, and I'll start by saying the Japanese have come so far since the 1920s. The brutality and the imperialism and colonialism that was expressed in the 1920s, not just by Japan, by many countries, including our own, you can't just gloss over that. You have to acknowledge and face head on there was darkness within that society. Within every society, there is a darkness that needs to be brought to light. And so one of the themes that I touch on throughout it is there is a repressive government, there is a repressive social structure that is pushing down on the individual and crushing people. It's in the 1920s, it was the rise of, fascism in Germany with the Gestapo. In Japan, they had an equivalent to it called the Toko. They were the special hire police. They were the equivalent of the Gestapo, which spread terror throughout not just the colonies, but at home among the people. You have an imperial army that is sitting on top of Korea, Taiwan, parts of China. For a period of time, I don't know if you're familiar with that, the 1920s, but the United States, Great Britain, France, and Japan invaded Siberia and occupied Vladivostok and would march as far inland as the Tunguska forest, where we all know the Tunguska 1908 blast. So, the Allies, this was in 1918 through 1922, occupied Siberia. So going back to theme, one of the themes that I wanted to touch on is the common people struggling against oppression. And it's not something that I put in heavy-handed and thinking, oh, I'm gonna, tell this story over and over. But as I was looking at it, there are many times that this theme of how can the individual still have a meaningful life and overcome a greater existential evil under an oppressive regime or under a situation that is they are the outsider and alien within a society, or they are at the bottom of the pecking order and they are the heroes of the story. So an example of this would be the Japanese have a native population called the Ainu, who live up in northern Hokkaido. When the Yamato Japanese arrived, millennia earlier, they pushed the Ainu from Honshu all the way back up into Hokkaido. When the Meiji Restoration happened, the Meiji government, this is the 1860s going into the 1890s, early 1900s, set out on a brutal campaign of cultural genocide, essentially, much as we did with the Native Americans here in the United States and Canada. The Japanese said, we're going to assimilate the Ainu into mainstream Japanese culture. And they went up with the army and colonizers, and they basically rounded up the kids, put them in Ainu schools, much as here the Native Americans were put in Indian schools. The native language was obliterated and lost. One of the main characters I have in the storyline there is this young woman who's a real person who recorded the Ainu stories in the native tongue. She was, I think she died when she was like 20 or 22, but from the time she was 18 to the time she died, she wrote and recorded this amazing body of work, which is called the Yukar, which is the native stories of the Ainu that would not have survived otherwise. And so she's a main character in the Hokkaido storyline when you go up there. Here's a young woman from a marginalized group who is fighting against this system, not by violence, by recording memories, by putting these things down that the characters can interact with and hopefully become inspired by. Her act of rebellion is this recording of her people's culture that is being lost and obliterated. In Korea, one of the most controversial things that I faced in writing this book is Japan occupied Korea at this time. And I really struggled with how do you present this in a manner that addresses this horrible topic that is painful to so many people now. It is divisive. It creates a great deal of anger. So one of the things that I have in that is I have heroes in it that are Koreans who are in the resistance, who are fighting against the Japanese there, but not making all Japanese into evil villains. There are Japanese there who are working towards good as well. There are Japanese there that are working towards evil. There are Koreans there that are working towards evil. So trying to show that there is a spectrum on both sides, but also really talking about, resistance in that way, that, the underdog fighting back against this big system, and just in the tone of, whether when you go to like a girls' school, there's a girls' school, of course there is in the world of RPGs, the mysteries that you can solve there, you can actually follow an entire storyline where the high school girls are the heroes. The administration won't listen to them. The adults won't listen to them, very Harry Potter style. They have to solve the mystery themselves of a fox spirit that's, wreaking havoc at their school. So the investigators could be the girls at the school, or the investigators can interact with them and solve this mystery that's going on. But there, it's the society itself won't listen to the people within society. So I think the theme that I would hope people 50 years from now still would resonate with people is universally, whether it's the 1920s in Japan or present day America or 50 years from now, somebody is reading this in another country, they can say to themselves, I understand who these people are. They are normal people who are struggling beneath some oppression, yet their humanity is not broken when they are tested by not just that, but even this cosmic evil or horror that they are having to struggle against. So that's kind of a theme that I would love people to be able to take away is it's a universal thing that we all go through. And I think that, players will react to, much as readers. When you read a book, you're subconsciously reacting to things that are in your own life that you may not even be thinking of, that's woven in there. There's a reason why it resonates with you. There's a universal humanity that I think we all share. And part of that is I really do believe people at heart are good. 90% of the people that you'll run into in your life are great. It only takes the 5 or 10% to ruin our days. But most people are good. Most people want to achieve good. But sometimes, even in pursuit of good, you can do evil acts. You can, misinterpret what you should be doing. So that's something that I would hope people take away.
If you were an investigator in this time period, in this setting, who would you be?
Who would I be? I would love to be probably a either an antiquarian or an archaeologist. If I was going to go down those roads, and here's why, especially thinking about Japan in particular, that at this time different areas had been isolated from each other. Korea was the hermit kingdom. Japan had been closed off for 250 years up until it finally opened in the Meiji era. China was a great vast unknown to the Western world, and there was just so much new cultural information coming out. And in the 1800s in the West, at 1700s in the West, you began having people going down to Greece and Italy, and finding all these amazing things in Egypt and Egyptology. And by the 1920s, that was beginning to happen in Asia. And particularly the Japanese were spearheading this. Now, granted, part of it was their colonial efforts. They were spreading out as colonizers and wanting to understand the areas they were going into. And there was a certain competition with the West where, okay, England, you're going down and you're looting the Parthenon. Well, we can go into China and we're going to loot these amazing things. So there's a looting aspect, unfortunately, to it all too. But it's an amazing age of discovery, because there are, like, for example, the Han presence in Korea was very little known, because the Han Chinese had come in, they'd occupied most of Korea. The Japanese and Chinese had always fought back and forth over the Korean Peninsula. And over the course of time, this disappeared. The Han dynasty's presence there had disappeared. And then it was being dug up and rediscovered and interpreted in a new light of science. Japan, for I'd say since the year 660, somewhere around that, in maybe it was 640 CE, the Japanese court decided to consolidate its power, and it did so by obliterating the all competing native written forms of writing, and they incorporated the Chinese ideograms, which when you look at Japanese and you see, why do they have all the complicated things like the Chinese? Basically, in the 6th century or the 7th century AD, they imported Chinese writing, but they did it so that they could completely suppress alternative thought at the time, so that everything had to be official, and they could control all of the written documents, because everything had to be written in this new writing style imported from China. Everything else was taboo, illegal, and burned. So in the 1920s, you have this mad scramble by Japanese uh, archaeologists and ethnographers trying to understand where did their culture come from. It was a complete tabula rasa, after this obliteration period, and even up into the 1940s, that obliteration continued. And so that no one will really ever know where did the ethnic Japanese come from, what was their original writing system like, because it was so complete. But yet you had these people who were trying to discover, where did we come from, where do we fit into this vast pattern of humanity. So as a player, playing a character, I think that'd be a lot of fun to delve into, because also it goes into the mysteries that, in the 1920s were rife with the legend of Mu and Atlantis, and lost continents still could exist, and secret things buried under the earth could be found, and you could descend down into the pyramids and find lost civilizations miles underground. The Mound from H.P. Lovecraft, where they talk about the society of the Kinyan, I think it is, where you've got the giant mound in somewhere, I can't remember what part of the United States it is, but the guy goes down into it and he discovers this lost civilization that predated Atlantis. So, but you had those theories filtering into Japan, and the Japanese took most of things coming from the West at face value. So the steam engine, the electric light, and Atlantis were kind of all taken at face value, or the possibility of the existence of a continent named Mu. As far as the Japanese knew, well, it came from the West. There must be something to this. Also at the time, I love that, and there's a section on it in the myth and mythos section. The Japanese really embraced parapsychology, not at the university levels, not at the official levels, but it really fit in well with the Shinto animist view of the world, spiritualism. So you had this large influx of thoughtography became big in some circles, where you could see the auras, and so they would incorporate photography as a science with seeing mystical auras around people. But there's this spiritualism and mysticism interwoven with the exploration of the past that's fascinating. So anyway, long-winded way of saying archaeologist or antiquarian.
So one last question. What is next after this? It sounds like there's so much potential story ideas. I even feel listening to you, I feel like there could be more stories that could be developed from this setting. Where any thoughts about continuation of some sort?
Well, one of the things I've been doing over the past about a month and a half is I've been reaching out to Japanese authors of scenarios. There's Call of Cthulhu is huge in Japan, and a lot of it is modern scenarios. For those who are curious, if you go to booth.com, I think I sent you a link to Booth, or if not, I'll shoot you a link. In the United States, Europe, we have Miskatonic Repository on RPG, and you'll also see on there for the Korean Call of Cthulhu community, RPG and Miskatonic Repository are the go-to place. Unfortunately, for the Japanese, it's really hard to navigate putting something on Drive-Thru RPG. It really, they don't make it easy. So I'm hoping to change that, because I've created a PDF document in Japanese with screen captures and translations, where here's how you do it, here's a step-by-step. And I'm trying to encourage more Japanese authors to put their scenarios on Drive-Thru RPG, and also helping them translate. So there's a select few that I went through, especially for the 1920s. There's just, I can't tell you the awesome scenarios I've read over the last month and a half, that just go places you wouldn't expect, and just have such a unique twist on the mythos that I think people are going to really love. So I've been trying over the last month and a half to encourage Japanese authors, let's get these things translated, put them up on the drive through RPG for people here to see. Because I think it's going to really open people's eyes that there's a whole world of Call of Cthulhu going on out there that we just aren't accessing. There's a huge language barrier, and also, I hate to say it, there's a uh, we're very parochial, in America particularly, but even England, it's very parochial. You don't look out. You've got blinders. We've all got blinders on, and part of it is our own insecurity of, it's like, well, what if I misunderstand what they're saying? This maybe I don't translate it right. Maybe it's too hard to translate. But it's also we only we navel gaze a lot, and I want to try to break people out of that and say there's a whole world of cool stuff out there. Take a look. And so, I'm starting with 1920s era material, but hopefully over time, if this becomes popular, people buy it, it'll encourage more Japanese authors to bring some of their really unique, cool modern day settings into drive through RPG, so that people here can actually access it, because they love anything that comes from here over there. I mean, Miskatonic repository is big. There's a big underground translation thing of anything that's Chaosium that comes out gets snapped up, and it's equally cool over there. I just want people here to be able to see that.
Mm.
I am writing three scenarios right now that I'm hoping to turn into like 120, 140 page book and put it out on the Miskatonic repository that'll have three scenarios that are more classically structured, that so you can play through. One of them goes down to uh, the area around it's Yamada, Uji Yamada, which is now Issei, where the Issei shrines are, and the pearl divers there are having a little trouble, and the with some mythos creatures and some Japanese creatures as well. So I think that'll be a lot of fun. So I'm working on three scenarios for that, encouraging other authors to bring some works in, and that's kind of where I'm at for the moment.
Hmm. Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this fantastic book. Again, it's Call of Cthulhu, Japan, Empire of Shadows, Hunting the Mythos in Imperial Era Japan. I will put a link below for anyone that wants to check out the book at PDF, and options to buy it in print through drive-through. So everyone out there, thank you for taking the time. Again, David, thank you so much.
Manny,
And
thank you so much for having me on Really Dicey. You guys do awesome stuff. I love the channel. I love watching. It's fun. You guys are so passionate. You get into it and you love it. And that's what I love about people who are in this industry, who are gaming, whatever game you play, have that passion, love it, and you guys clearly do. And that's what it takes. We all got to love the storytelling experience, and also just getting together and having fun with friends. I mean, something that you don't get when you're just playing on a video game. You're focused on running around and shooting things. Here, it makes you think. It's a social interaction, and whether you do it on Zoom or you're doing it on Roll20 or whatever virtual platform or in person you do it, get out there and game. Get out there and have fun. Roll some dice with some friends.
mm. And I love that we're living in a time where uh like where not only role-playing games are we having fun, and again, like you said, social interaction, but we're learning things, our looks like we've done well in the, I guess, the culture, and role-playing games and the development of role-playing games, where we're doing such really good research. Like I bet you once I finish reading Japan Empire of Shadows, I'm gonna learn so much about 1920 Japan, which I probably would not have learned normally through normal American media. Um, so yes, again, David, thank you, and to our viewers, again, thank you for watching. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next time.